And we're now going to hear from Duncan McCann from the Five Rights Foundation, which was the body under the leadership of Beeben Kidron, in fact still under the leadership of Baroness Beeben Kidron. And Duncan is the CEO of Five Rights. They designed the code. Is it CEO or Field Marshal? I can't quite remember, Duncan.
I think that's a bit grand for I think I'll just go with head of policy implementation for today, John. But thanks for the push, and I'll definitely let Beeben know. Just checking you can hear me and you can see my slides, because all I can see is my slides on the computer. So just checking for some validation. Yep.
We can hear you all right. Yeah.
So brilliant. So I'm really here to talk about why we think minimum standards are actually the key issue here in order to move age assurance technology from where it's been for the last kind of decade, which is kind of ready to go. Into a place where we can actually see it implemented.
Duncan, your slides haven't opened. We can hear you and see you, but we can't see your slides.
Okay, let me just. Oh yeah, I've just had it. I was just showing myself. I thought I was the only one needed to see them. So just
a beautiful sight, but not enough.
Yeah.
All right, we can see them now. Yeah.
Now you can see them perfectly. Brilliant. Sorry about that. Thanks for that, John. So what I'm here to talk about is minimum standards, what they are, and why they're important. I think the previous few presentations that I've heard have really shown why standards are really the key piece of the puzzle that we need, as I say, to transform this technology and actually make it really, really useful. I think one really, really important thing from our perspective is that age assurance is really not an end in and of itself. We don't need to know that because it is important to know their age, but only because it can give children really the digital world that they need and deserve. So only when it is used for something, and that can be to block. But again, we're very, very clear that it is not just about the blocking. So why do we need age assurance? Just very, very quickly again, and it's been spoken about by previous speakers, I know, but so part of it is to be stopped. And sometimes we do really need to try to prevent children getting access to places. But it's really important for us, there are also different reasons. Children also need to be helped. So as they engage in new and potentially risky behavior, they can be helped to either to understand, to mitigate some of those risks. Again, we're seeing some really interesting implementations of that kind of technology, and they also need to learn. So sometimes children need to learn. As they learn new skills, they need to be supported in doing so. And until you understand the age of the user in front of you, it's very hard to know how appropriately to stop, help, or assist in learning the user that you've got in front of you. So again, that's just a really, really important perspective from us at Five Rights. Now, how should we do age assurance? And I know really interesting to see the various presentations going forward. We see that there are multiple ways in which you can do age assurance, and here are we're just about to release some kind of technical documentation, trying to make it easier to understand some of the different ways of doing age assurance. But the real key message for us is that really for us, the technology is not important. What matters is that the process of doing the age assurance meets the minimum standards to ensure that, and these are the three words that we really think are really, really important, that it preserves the privacy of the user, that it is secure, and that it is inclusive. And so I'll go into a bit more detail about what those really mean. But for us, we have seen and indeed have seen demos from companies using many of these different systems, all of which can be privacy preserving, all of which can be done in a secure way and can be made and implemented in a way that is inclusive. So we see less our job as deciding what technology, what particular method of age assurance, or what particular technological solution is best today, which importantly may not be tomorrow, and certainly not in 5 or 10 years' time. But what we see as being critical is to establish those minimum standards to ensure that people using this technology can be confident that it is not abusing their data, that they will not be subject to security breaches, and that they will be able to use it in a way. And you know, part of the reasons we've seen, you know, the French authorities back down over, you know, at the last minute and their fight with pornography websites to implement age assurance. Part of the reasons why we haven't made huge progress here in the UK or across Europe, despite the Audiovisual Services Directive and others, is because, and I think it mimics also where we got to with the Digital Economy Act 2017 here in the UK. We make law which mandates age assurance, it goes to be implemented, and at the 11th hour, it is pulled back because ultimately the concerns are, and the risks are real, that this could lead to a huge invasion of privacy, to huge data lakes building up of sensitive material, both containing parts of our personally identifiable information linked to sensitive databases, and all of those really come into play at that 11th hour, which means we never actually, we struggle to get to the next stage. So at Five Rights, we have been pushing this for a long time now, that what we need to move forward is these rules of the road. What we need is minimum standards. And indeed, the chair of our charity, so Baroness Biban Kidron, as John introduced us, put in place a bill in front of the UK Parliament last year, a private member's bill, which would have required the UK to create standards on these 11 principles of what we believe good age assurance should be. And some of these, you know, are obvious: protect the privacy of the user, things like that. Other things, you know, we've heard other speakers talk about, that it should be proportionate to the risk. The shortcut that we use here is, you know, nobody should be required to show their passport to show Peppa Pig, but equally, it should not be possible to get unfiltered access to hardcore pornography for a 5-year-old. So there's got to be some way in making sure that the particular age assurance is appropriate for that particular risk. And then there are other things around the standards as well, around, again, security, making sure that there's the redress possibility in case things go wrong. Again, to ensure that this isn't a way to kind of lock children out of spaces where they have a right of access. It needs to be accessible and inclusive. As I said, not unduly restrict access. Needs to be some kind of way to help children understand it, particular purpose that it is put to. So different forms of age assurance can be effective and the right things in different kind of consequences. And it must be compatible with data protection legislation. Although I think importantly, really it has to go, it has to be compatible with it, but ultimately it needs to go much further than the minimums set out in things like GDPR. So in the next few slides, I'm just going to try and give a bit more meat as to what we mean by, or what a service looks like that really meets these standards. So first of all, if we look at the data requirements for age assurance, you know, the first thing we must ensure is that obviously that any data process for the purpose of age assurance has a legal basis on which that process is done. That data is collected for that specific purpose and is not reused for other purposes. Again, this is very, very important. If we're to have faith in age assurance as a means of not furthering the surveillance economy, but in fact doing something different, then we must ensure that the data gathered and processed for the purposes of age assurance doesn't further the surveillance goals of the many platforms that we'll be visiting who will want to take advantage of that. Also important that providers do not sell, share, or whatever other synonym of that word you want to put in the input or output data beyond providing the results. Another really important principle is really around that principle of data minimization. If we are estimating age, there are plenty of data fields that will not be appropriate to have recorded. As I think somebody said, you know, email address, the size of your shoe, potentially your address, things like that will not be relevant to, will not generally be relevant to an age assurance process that's being done, for instance, on the basis of a facial scan or something else. And then finally, obviously, storage limitation to ensure that we don't build up massive data lakes and other such problems, that the data is retained for the shortest possible time. Now, what I'm pleased to say is that many of the providers that I speak to already meet many of these requirements, if not all of them. What is lacking at the moment is any way for them to objectively communicate this in a way that has the faith of all users, so that we could use these services which are privacy preserving, which do seek to do so with confidence, and so they could be implemented as such. So again, this isn't a technical problem that these are things that can't be done or even aren't being done today. It's merely that it is very hard for the providers who already do it to differentiate themselves from don't by providing a standard, or indeed even better, where there would be a mandatory standard as a condition of access to the market at any particular country, so that users could be confident that any service that they're using on a legitimate site would already meet these standards. So these are kind of the basics for data protection. Importantly, although using the principles of GDPR and in the UKR Data Protection Act, we would expect this to go further by not allowing people to consent, for instance, to giving over extra data, things like that. Just quickly talk through, so if we've talked about the data requirements, what we also need to ensure is some of the other technical requirements for the for age assurance systems. So just as we must ensure that we don't over-process data and so on, we must ensure that when we do move data around and process it, that we do so securely, and that we process and transfer it with the proper protocols in place, and that when we're required, we store again in a way that is protective. Again, not storing any unnecessary data. In terms of inclusivity, again, this is another really, really important concept, especially when thinking about things like hard ID or facial analysis or capacity testing, where either through lack of having the physical ID, which is in the hard identifiers, or anything that goes to non quote unquote kind of normal features within the way that the systems recognize them, we'll need to ensure that providers really make their systems work in the real world across the diverse range of people who may use their services. And this may require sometimes to have multiple different provisions for people, so that if the facial analysis doesn't work, they can move to another form of age verification or an appeals process or something. But it's really important to ensure that the deployment of these systems is inclusive, so we don't see children shut out, again, where they shouldn't be. Accuracy is obviously very, very important. Many people have already spoken about this, and I don't need to talk about it very much. But only to say that, again, accuracy is, if we are seeking to judge whether people are over or under 18, for me as a 40-year-old, to get that answer right, the system actually doesn't have to be all that accurate. And I'm not advocating for systems that could have 20, 30 years of inaccuracy in them, but just that, again, you have to think about the purpose of the system and the users, so that it's not always necessary to know within a day or a week or a year of the age. But for many instances, it obviously that is very useful. And then finally, the accessibility of the particular service. And again, and this is about format, language, making sure that people really understand what they're doing when they do that, and obviously giving people a means to challenge and any alternatives potentially where some of the systems being asked are risky, or where you can offer an option. So that's kind of around the technical requirements. And then finally, if you think about the system design requirements, so as the third pillar of what we think about what age assurance technology should do, here we're really talking about two key criteria, which is around transparency and accountability. And here we would expect age assurance systems to be obviously transparent. And what that means is basically explaining in age-appropriate language how the system would work, information about why the age assurance is being conducted, again, a simple overview of the data required, and then again, an ability to review any policies should anybody wish, although obviously understand that there would still be minimal, as with all privacy policies. And then obviously, very importantly, again, that information, how you can challenge their decisions and exercise privacy rights. So that must be, really front and center, again, if these systems are to be trusted and to be widely adopted. And then finally, obviously, the system also has to be accountable. And so there again, it has to be able to respond to those challenges, change results, and obviously then take responsibility for the decisions that have been made. So that's a really whistle-stop tour. I've been trying to cover quite a bit, but really in conclusion, what we believe is that the technology to make age assurance privacy preserving, secure and inclusive is already there. It's available today. And what we're really lacking to move this whole area forward is not more technology, is not more innovation, but actually standards, so that we can ensure that those companies who have already done the hard work, who are already making tools and solutions that can help us with this massive challenge, can gain those standards, so that we can then ensure that this technology is implemented in a way that we want, which is, again, to reiterate, which is about all privacy preservation, security, and inclusiveness. So thank you very much for listening. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. But yeah, thank you very much.
Duncan, that's great. Five Rights has become a major player, very recently, but a major player in this whole space, not just in the UK, but I mean, I'm probably fair to say globally now. Their code was adopted by the legislature in California quite recently, and other states in the USA are also now actively pursuing it. So they're a very welcome recent addition to the space. Any questions for Duncan? No, it looks like you've covered all the territory, Duncan. Thanks very much indeed. By the way, you do look like you're a regular in Game of Thrones, by the way. You did have a bit part in Game of Thrones.
I'll take it as a compliment.
It is a compliment, yeah. Bye-bye, Duncan. Cheers, bye.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.